And I have to say, it's great to be here back in San Francisco. This is my hometown. I grew up in the Outer Mission. And it's also an amazing honor to be hosting this session at AdTech 2013. So we've got three incredible panelists here today who I'm going to introduce to you in just a second. You know, 16 years ago, in this very area, just a few blocks away from here, the digital agency in this industry really started. The company I was working for at the time, Organic, was in the same building with Wired Magazine and a few other startups. And literally, this building was a bunch of converted sweatshops. Downstairs, people were actually sewing garments. And when I think back to that time, it's just amazing how far we've come as an industry. When I look at the business landscape of San Francisco and you see Twitter, Zynga, Google, it's just mind-blowing how far we've come and that we've actually arrived as an industry. So with that, welcome to building mobile ads, apps, and experiences that don't suck. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, the key words in that sentence are do not suck. I'm going to talk a lot about that today. So I'm going to be a little bit biased here and say that this could be the most important session you'll attend at AdTech. Why? Hear me out now. Because we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on media, right? Sometimes millions. Countless man-hours on development, blood, sweat, and digital tears, building, planning, marketing, usability groups, focus groups, heuristic models, et cetera, getting people to our apps, ads, and products. But if the user doesn't convert, engage, or transact due to a poor user experience or just plain boring content, basically it sucks, right? So we're going to talk a lot about how we can actually avoid that. So let me start by introducing our mobile brain trust. First off, we have Martin Studart, who's sorry? Ooh. This one? How did that happen? Roll with the punches. We have Martin Studart, who's VP of Business Development at Zeit. He will share with us some launch lessons on releasing Zeit 2.0. Then we'll have John Sangiovanni, who is co-founder and VP of Product at Zumobi. And he'll actually run through some great creative examples on the rise of native mobile advertising. And last and certainly not least, the man with the great picture, Jonathan will run through Don Draper's 10 rules on building apps that don't suck. So that's going to be crazy. Anyway, now the goal of this session, it's David Akers, okay, 49ers. The goal of this session is that we walk out of here with at least one thing, hopefully more than that, that is impactful and actionable and can potentially change your mobile approach and your strategy to development, okay? And if for some reason we fail at that, I've already made a deal with these guys that we're actually going to film a Harlem Shake video that doesn't suck, all right? Okay, let's get started. So, as I mentioned, I'm from Briabe Mobile. We're based in Venice, California. We're on the beach, but very rarely have a chance to actually go to the beach. We have a few different ad products that we work with. Our first thing is we have our ad network, which is American Next. And we also have a mobile CRM product called Mbond. And also we have our last kind of key product is a mobile social product called Tweet Off, which I'm going to share with you in a minute. Now, our focus really is on multiculturals. And multiculturals are defined as African American, Hispanic, Asian. And people always ask us, well, why multicultural? And technology is technology, right? Well, it just so happens that multiculturals, the audience, actually over-index on mobile more than anyone. They're more engaged. They respond to ads. They have better brand recall. They download apps more than anybody. They have the latest smartphones. So it's important that we focus on that audience because they're also the highest growth segment in the population. About 92% of the growth over America over the next 5 to 10 years will come from multicultural. So brands are very keen and aware of this. So they're looking at ways to actually reach them, and mobile is actually the best platform for this. So one of our great clients, which is Home Depot, they are very aggressive about reaching the multicultural audience. They actually have a campaign that they've been running for the last 4 years that actually targets African Americans, millennials, 18 to 24, which are students at historically black colleges and universities, HBCUs. Now, what this campaign is, essentially, is it's just, you vote for your school. So if I go to Grambling University or Howard, you vote for your school. Anybody can vote. You don't have to be a student, so it extends to alumni and family and friends, et cetera. And if you win, you get a grant, which is amazing. Now, this grant is used to actually do for renovations. A lot of it's around sustainability and eco-friendly resources, wheelchair ramps, sports facilities, upgrades, et cetera. So this is a way to kind of reach the young audience, because they're not thinking about Home Depot. Let's be real about that. But they're trying to build this brand equity with that audience so that when they go out in the world, they'll actually think about Home Depot instead of Lowe's or some of the other competitors. So they run this program. The problem is they weren't thinking about the audience that much. And their standard approach was really, okay, we're going to run a little bit of radio. We're going to do some digital display ads, right, for web. And then we're going to do a little bit of social. But, their social presence isn't actually bad. It's actually very good with the regular Home Depot brand. But around this campaign, it was pretty sparse, okay? So each of these channels then drive people to the website to vote. Now, this all sounds good. And actually, they've had pretty good results year over year. But there's a problem. The issue is that the media target is super narrow. And I don't know if you guys have done media buys or anything like that, but if you're trying to do something that's very narrow and very targeted, it's expensive. And they didn't have a lot of money, right? You couldn't vote via mobile. And the social presence that they had was not great. So, and the campaign lasts about 5 weeks. So how do you get it to scale beyond the initial media push? And how do you boost participation? So the first thing we do when we look at building apps and ads and experiences that don't suck is we look at the audience. We figure out the insights and behavior. And again, as I mentioned before, African Americans use social more than anyone. 26% of African Americans use Twitter, outnumbering Hispanic and whites. The other thing about the actual community and the target is the fact that HBCUs, there needs to be a community dialogue. It's a very tight-knit group of schools. Even though they're very competitive with sports and everything else. And, smartphones are super important. So based on that, how do we amplify? The key way to amplify really is, got to use mobile, right? That's the primary engagement channel. Social, no-brainer. HBCUs are a community, as I mentioned, so we need to leverage the network chatter, the competitive spirit and everything. And it needs to be able to, the other key thing is it needs to be able to cover a wide range of devices. So building a native app at the time, especially we had 5 weeks to develop with, about 6 weeks actually, probably wasn't the best approach. And we had to build something that doesn't suck. So our solution was TweetOff. Now, TweetOff is an HTML5 mobile application that essentially aggregates social channels. So we aggregate Instagram, Facebook fan pages, Twitter into one space. I often tell clients, because sometimes they can't grasp that, that think of it as if you're hosting an event, right? You're hosting a party, and the brand is the host, right? So if you look on one side, the brand has these different channels. A lot of times it's fragmented when you have your Twitter channel, your Instagram, and maybe someone might follow some of these feeds, or maybe become fans on your or like your presence on Facebook. But it's still, the experience isn't really cohesive. On the other side, you have the audience, and they're doing their thing. They have their friends and followers, and they may be talking about your brand or talking about the experience or the campaign. But the key is to bring it all together in one conversation, okay? And this creates greater opportunity for to share and participate and really amplify and propagate the message across the network. So let me go ahead and actually show you this, because I think this is the easiest way to really understand the experience. Uh-oh. Technical difficulties. All right. Maybe I won't show you that. Interesting. I love PowerPoint. Okay. Not sure why that happened. All right, let me just go back to this other slide then. So basically, unfortunately I can't show you this, but I can, if you look on the actual website for AdTech, we have a link to the experience, and you can check it out. But essentially, the platform basically pulls in all of the tweets all of the Instagram feeds into one experience. We have an infinite scroll, so you can go in any direction. And this is not doing it justice. I do apologize for this. And essentially, it allows people to have a conversation, and it allows the brand to have the vote mechanism directly through their application, so then that way users aren't, trying to vote through a website that isn't formatted. And essentially, that's kind of the deal with that. Again, I apologize. I'm not sure why this didn't come up, but we keep it moving. All right, well, the development learnings, and again, I'm sorry about this, but development learnings, the way we did it is because it was a mobile web application, we were able to build this a little bit faster than you would, say, for a native application. And there's some, there's different schools of thought in terms of when you use a native application over a HTML5 application. But the great thing about it is that we can just use standard open source tools. We use jQuery for DOM manipulation, HTML5, in order to build this infinite scroll experience, which I wish I could show to you, but you can check it on the website. We actually used a Masonry jQuery plugin. We did a lot of customization to that. And then also, inside the experience, when the tweets are coming in, we have an admin panel that actually moderates tweets. So then that way you can block out anything that's negative, or anything that's off-brand, or anything that's off-color. So we use a standard LAMP stack for that for our admin panel. It also manages the Twitter feeds and everything that's coming in. So when you're doing that kind of thing, one thing that we found out is you have to be aware of the kind of roadmap in terms of the release of the social APIs, like what's available. Because as soon as Twitter or Facebook or Instagram changes something and they deprecate a certain API call, you're kind of hosed. So you need to be thinking ahead and keeping a look at that, because what we were doing is we're pulling in tweets from the Twitter Firehose through the streaming API. If they change that for some reason, we need to be aware of that ahead of time. Otherwise, we can run into issues. The other thing is we were tabulating the tweets in order to, for each school, so that they had, we were calculating that, and each school had the top number of tweets or Instagram hashtags actually won a prize for that. They actually got the grant award. So we had to be able to calculate that in somewhat real time. With the social APIs that they have, you have to be concerned about how often you can actually hit their server. The real-time updates aren't always as real-time, so that's something you have to kind of factor in terms of latency and those kind of things. Now, we made it responsive, and there's some great tools out there. There's Twitter Bootstrap, and there's Foundation. There's a bunch of great tools out there. We didn't use any of that. We actually did a lot of our stuff customized. So it was the standard CSS3 media queries for the UI. We did some device detection, which was very important for the matrix part of it, because we had to be able to manage that from a jQuery standpoint versus just the CSS. And one of the other key takeaways for us is that you have to make sure that you do as much usability testing as possible. This is key because we found out when you're so close to the product and you're building out something, and then you actually give it to somebody who really doesn't give a crap about your product, you learn a lot of things. You get some real truths there. So, and that really helped us with the product development. That helped us with the usability and UI and the user experience. And another key thing, and this is almost a no-brainer, but determine what OSs and what devices you'll support up front. So if you get a brief from a client, you better be damn sure. If they say, hey, we want it responsive and it's going to work across everything, be sure that you actually have some parameters on what you're actually going to support. Because, like for this, for example, the tweet off, we only were able to support up to OS 2.3.3 on Android and a couple other things. So that's a key thing. So in summary, again, know audience through your data and insights. You've got to know that. That's going to help you to deliver the right solution. Make your client or brand the hero by providing a really cool experience where the conversation all comes into one piece. You don't have to have a fragmented social experience. We use TweetOff to bring it all together. However, don't let the brand dictate the conversation. Now, you can block people out who have negative things, but don't let them kind of sway that, because people need to be able to express themselves and be able to interact. Again, make great use of the open source tools that are available to build app-like experiences. you don't have to actually go native all the time. And it depends on what you're doing, obviously. If you're building games or things that need hardware acceleration or the camera, you may need to go native. But for this experience, we're able to get a wide range of devices covered, and we just did this through HTML5. But on that note, mobile can be tricky, so always determine the devices and the minimum OS you'll support, and get human feedback, test, and quickly iterate. So I'm sorry if I wasn't able to actually show you the experience, but I guarantee you it didn't suck. We actually had great results. We had great results from the last year. We went about, because we built this experience, Home Depot saw about a good 40 to 50% increase in terms of votes and participation. So I'll let the audience say if it sucks or not, so based on that information. So that's it for me. I hope you found that useful. Next up, we have Martin Studart, again, VP of Business Development at Zeit, and take it away.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So I'm going to spend a few minutes and talk about Zeit, and I'm going to focus on a case study of a major launch that we went through recently and some of the lessons that we learned in terms of bringing a major update of our app to the market. So for those of you that are not familiar, or even those of you that are, with Zeit, just a refresher. So Zeit is, we call ourselves an intelligent magazine. We operate in the news aggregation space of the market. And Zeit explores passions and helps you discover new content. And we do this in a number of ways that make us a bit different from some of the other vendors out there. We have a huge selection of topics and sections which you can choose content from, over 40,000 of these now in the app. We focus on serendipitous discovery, so making sure that you as a reader can find amazing content every time you come into Zeit. And anecdotally, one of the things we hear time and again from our readers is that they use Zeit and they end up reading things which they just think are amazing that they would never have found themselves. So we're trying to create those moments of discovery that feel very real and very natural. Third thing is that Zeit continuously learns. So one of our mantras is Zeit's very easy to set up. We can get you started with some great content, and then the more that you use Zeit, the more we learn about your interests, your preferences, things that you like, things that you don't like, and we will continually steer you to better and better content. And the final thing is, in terms of personalization, we do this in a way that everybody's Zeit is different. So, we have, if you like, an interest graph built up on every one of our readers, and when you come into the app, if you go into the business section or the sports section, if Tim had that in his Zeit, I had it in mine, we open them up at the same time, we're going to receive a different selection of content based on, for example, Tim may like, baseball, football, for example. I may like cricket and croquet, for example. And we'll tailor the content towards those particular preferences. So that's sort of Zeit in a nutshell. Now, the case study I'm going to talk about is the major relaunch that we did on iOS. So Zeit is an app. We're available on iOS, and we're available on Android. And at the end of last year, and we've been around for about 2 years, and at the end of last year, we did a major relaunch on iOS. And I can talk also about the decisions as to whether to do a major relaunch on all platforms simultaneously versus one at a time. We chose to focus first on iOS, which we considered at the time to be our flagship platform. And we made some big changes. So on the left, you see an image of how Zeit used to look. And on the right, this is the change that we went to. So 4 major changes that happened to Zeit. First of those was a fairly major change to the UI. We went to a much more visually rich user experience. We brought in bigger images. We brought in interactive modules that allow you to look through multiple pieces of content and scroll through them. The second thing is we started pushing more intelligent content discovery. So we've built in lots more hooks in the app which will suggest and recommend great things to go to next be they articles, be they topics that we think that if you've read this, if you've been in this section, this could be a great place to go next. And we build these in various places in the app. Third thing, user controls. So we did a major revamp on user controls in terms of access to your profile as a user inside of the app, in terms of access to your history as a user inside of the app that we didn't have before. And we exposed these in a rather different way. And then the final thing, last but not least, in terms of the algorithm, so Zeit lives and breathes on the algorithm, the recommendation engine, if you like, that's underneath Zeit. We made further improvements to the algorithm, including extending the set of topics that we can point you to that more than trebled in size up to about 40,000 of these topics now. So really pushed the tail of topics. So a very big improvement for us. And this, on iOS, this is our biggest single change to the app since we had launched the app approximately a year or 15 months prior to then. So it was a big change. So I think the question is, how did it go, and what were some of the lessons that we learned from this? So, in terms of kind of the positives and less positives, and he said in a sort of politically vaguely correct way, things that worked well for us. So the App Store submission process went very smoothly, and I think we've worked with Apple quite closely over the last 2 years now, and I think to be honest, it's been a bit of a voyage of discovery on our part to figure out how to work more smoothly in terms of submissions. We'd learned some lessons. We made sure that we didn't have to do any major changes, any major rewrites, so that we knew when we were going to submit, and we were pretty confident when it was going to exit and go live in the App Store. And it was very important to us that we met the deadline because we were teeing this up just prior to the holidays. We wanted to make sure it went live to give us enough lead time prior to the holidays itself to actually build up the interest in the new app. So that went smoothly, and that was great. The second thing I mentioned was timing. So we very deliberately wanted to land the new app and have it go live just before the holidays in the US market. That's what happened. We predicted successfully that we would get a major boost in terms of downloads just by timing the launch along that way. And the second thing is, we got a major boost in terms of PR cycles. Some of that was planned. Some of it was serendipitous. The timing, again, helps. You build that momentum, that groundswell of interest. There are things that are being written at that time of the year in terms of top 10 lists, top apps from the year. If you can go live with something that's major, something big, something new, it's a great time to be getting into the market with that. And the third thing is that really for the first time for us, we got some significant Apple love or Apple featuring in the App Store itself. We'd had tidbits of love that had been sprinkled our way through the rest of the year. But this is the first time that we got a major feature in terms of editor's choice and other features in the App Store. And in terms of the rankings, boosting back up to be the #1 spot in terms of the news apps inside of the App Store. Again, it's huge as well because it can become self-reinforcing. If you get onto that first page, above the fold, more people will see you, more people will download you. It can become a self-reinforcing thing. So that worked very well. In terms of things that maybe didn't quite work so well, so one thing that we learned, maybe the hard way, is that if you make any major changes to your app and you already have a loyal user base, there's always going to be some of that user base that don't like what you've done, in terms of moving your cheese style or moving their cheese style. And so we heard this, and it's a fairly small percentage of individuals, but if they're very vocal, can have a meaningful effect, particularly in terms of the App Store ratings. We had always prided ourselves on being 4.5 stars, thereabouts, out of 5. And it doesn't take many one-star ratings to eat into that quite quickly. So that was a little bit painful at the time. I think we've learned a lesson from that. The second thing that we learned was that simultaneously with changing the app, we also decided to change the logo. which seemed like a good idea at the time. We thought we had a great new logo to launch with. Again, I think one thing that we learned was that a logo is an incredibly emotionally charged item. And let's just say that there was a polarized response to our new logo, which we thought symbolically worked great. Nice, warm, fuzzy logo. Didn't go so well with a fairly vocal minority in terms of our user base. So those are some lessons, some things that worked well and didn't. In terms of my final slide, some of the overall lessons that I would share with you. One is, if you're working in iOS and you're working with Apple, it's very important to get Apple's attention. It's probably not something you're going to get overnight. It's something you've got to work with. We've worked for 2 years on getting better at this, and I think we can still get a lot better. You have to pay attention to what they like and what they don't like. If they give you feedback, it's very important to listen to that feedback and demonstrate that you're taking the feedback in. Second is, if there are opportunities for you to showcase iOS features and major features that are coming into maybe new versions of iOS, it's worth considering as well, because it shows that you're being very responsive to what's coming from Apple and the platform. Second thing I'd say is it's important when you're doing major updates, drive towards differentiation, focus on your strengths. We focused very squarely on discovery and the intelligence in the app, and we piled on new features into that particular area. Third thing, reflecting some of the feedback that we got, is if you're making a major change, it is important to mitigate the risk. It's important to know ahead of time what feedback users may be giving you. And, we take feedback, we do user groups, etc. You have to be cognizant of that, and you maybe ought to think about ways of mitigating the risk, either by launching early, maybe by doing staged releases, maybe by having things teed up to reduce the impact of that feedback very quickly afterwards, which is the final thing I would say, is that I think a great rule of thumb is with any major release, have a schedule of quick feedback releases to come shortly afterwards. I think that does two things. One is it allows you to provide instant feedback and improvements on features that you may have introduced. Secondly, is it does allow you to get that reset from a ratings perspective if you have taken a hit in the App Store. If you go back in, respond to the feedback, get back in there, you can very quickly get back into a very comfortable position, and that's exactly what we did, and we're a lot happier with the ratings that we have now than we maybe did 3 months ago. So that's in a nutshell, Zeit 2.0.
Thank you, Martin. So next up, we have John Sangiovanni. It's all yours.
Thanks. Just to gauge the audience real quickly, by show of hands, how many of you are on the agency side representing brands? By show of hands, okay. And how many of you have, either on the agency side or with a publisher, how many of you have been involved with the publication of a native app, iPhone, Android, or elsewhere, okay? And how many of you have been involved in some capacity on the campaign or media planning or trafficking of a mobile ad campaign? Okay, good. So a pretty relatively even distribution. So I'm going to actually focus my case study on a little bit on the native mobile advertising side, just because that's very much in the consumer zeitgeist this 5 minutes, and I thought it's a really important topic to talk about in depth. I do want to mention a little bit of an interesting story about Zumobi as a company. We actually have two sides to our business. One side is that we are what's called a co-publisher, which means that we engage in these joint ventures with these major media brands where we essentially work with those publishers to publish their official apps in the multiple app stores. And those are really not done as work-for-hire style dev projects as much as comprehensive multi-platform media strategies that include design, development, publication. You can see these are some of our apps, the official app for NBC News, Meet the Press, Today Show, Motor Trend, Popular Science, bunch of sports apps. et cetera. So that actually, we've been doing that for 7 years. We actually did the first branded content app in the App Store around the Beijing Olympics, which was sponsored by Lenovo. We have a lot of learnings and scar tissue around really publishing and maintaining these very high-volume, publisher-oriented apps. But one of the most central learnings was really thinking about unconventional and elegant ways to think about advertising expressions inside those apps. I think we as Superphone users know how good we've all gotten at ignoring the 320 by 50 banner at the bottom of the screen or at the top of the screen. And so I think as user experience professionals and as brand strategists, we should all endeavor to think a little bit more unconventionally about how we present advertising assets, creative, and campaigns in the context of the high-volume apps that users already know and love. So in terms of my case studies, I think we should all endeavor sort of to find that ideal midpoint between a campaign-specific branded app and these unit-specific HTML5 expandable banners. Now let me talk about both briefly just to set the stage. In the olden days, 2011, we used to make these campaign-specific branded apps where you would essentially launch an app in the App Store that was really focused around a specific brand campaign. And those were super engaging and got really great engaging numbers. So we did a bunch of them with Chevy and Ford, with Pepsi, and a ton of those. The reality is that they were super sexy, but it was really hard to achieve scale. Unless you had tons of air cover from everything from TV commercials to billboards, you would get tens of thousands of users, if you're lucky, maybe even just thousands of users, which is not really an advertising campaign with scale. At the other end of the spectrum, we have these sort of unit-specific rich media banners, which was all the rage in 2012, which unfortunately the term rich media in mobile came to mean a little bit of everything and nothing. Most often it meant a banner with some animatics that when you tap on expands to a full screen interactive. But it typically expressed itself primarily as a 320 by 50 or something in that aspect ratio that was largely ignored. So I think what we are trying to endeavor to do is find this really nice midpoint between those two, the best of both worlds, the reach of a unit-centric campaign with the engagement of a brand campaign. And importantly, the second bullet, powered by great content. So brands are publishers. They have great content. We should celebrate that in advertising. And third, the other definition of native, which is leveraging the phone as a phone, being able to hook into the photo roll of a phone, being able to hook into the social media technology of the phone, being able to add a calendar item on the phone. That takes no small amount of technical kung fu and is way beyond the realm of what you can typically do with an HTML5 interactive. But there's plenty of hybrid technologies, including our own ZBI platform, that allows advertisers and agencies and publishers to be able to do these sort of best of both world experiences. So I'll show you two examples quickly, one really in each example. The first one I'm going to show you is the Chevy Technology Series example. So this was a really cool one in the sense that Chevy had created this very cool long-form content experience in book. So they basically created it in partnership with their agency, Goodby, and their media agency, and they were distributing this in book and in interactive. And it was great content. It was actually these long-form videos and long-form articles. And so they basically, using the Zumobi and ZBI technologies, wanted to take that and express it in an organic way in mobile inside the Motor Trend app on iPhone and Android. Importantly, there were no mobile assets for this campaign. No mobile destination page. The video wasn't transcoded for triple stream encoded mobile video. It was just at that point, it was really just a campaign with great content and great aesthetic visual language. So the first thing we did was, using ZBI, we essentially served it into the app as a special content section that came alive inside Motor Trend. So this is a top-tier automotive enthusiast app that people use many times a day. So that way, we essentially, on the loading screen, presented almost like a presented by style placement. Though, importantly, that was actually trafficked using a rich media ad server. So we could track detailed metrics. We could have it go live, date certain when the television or the print campaign went live. We didn't have to go through the certification process with Google or Apple because it was already part of our advertising platform, ZBI. The next thing that's cool is that on the home screen of the app, we literally lit up a new section in the app, which was the Chevy Technology section, which was branded by Chevy, but also nicely integrated into the design of the home screen of the app itself on Android and iPhone. Then, as the user was navigating through the content of this app, We even approached banners in a bit of a different way, in the sense that we use this auto-expandable and then auto-collapsible banner unit. So the strategy there is that rather than a static banner, which everybody ignores, or an expandable banner that blocks the user, which is extremely frustrating to users, we found this unit, which we call the paso doble, or two-step. It kind of slides up automatically. It hovers there for a very scientific 4.5 seconds, just enough for the user to kind of glance at the Corvette race car, and then it settles back down such that the call to action is left behind as a more conventional banner. Then when they actuate on that, that takes them into that sponsored content section in the app. And this is truly like long-form content with 2-minute-long videos and really great articles. I'm a car enthusiast, and I really found this content technically engaging. And then, importantly, Chevy had created great content with their agencies. So every couple of weeks, there was a new section. So a couple weeks later, there was the blue section, which was about propulsion, matched with blue banners that were served out throughout the experience. A couple weeks later, driving dynamics, boom, red banners that synchronized on driving dynamics. And so that way, even a user that launched this app every day, we got insanely high engagement numbers on this campaign because they're like, whoa, I saw the blue section, but I haven't read the yellow section. They click on that, and then they can dive in and experience that. Lastly, the only thing that we all miss from, from this era of campaign-specific branded apps is that beautiful real estate on the home screen of the phone where the brand's icon would live behind on the home screen of the phone. So we have this technology called Footprint that allows the user to tear out the special advertising section from the app where the media is served. You see that button at the top of the campaign that says Save to your home screen. When you tap on that, this takes you into an HTML flow that lets you be able to galvanize that experience as an HTML5 interactive that lives beyond the campaign, and even as fresh content gets delivered, it's available inside that experience. So that was one really, really successful campaign that we did together with Chevy inside the Motor Trend app. It got incredibly high engagement and was a beautiful user experience as well. So I think, hopefully by any assessment, it definitely did not suck. So the next example I would say is the American Express membership effect. And this one was cool because we wanted to run this at scale. We also wanted that deep kind of experience, but we wanted to run it at scale. So the cool thing about this campaign is we created a series of rich media interactives that ran across an array of apps. This is a travel-focused, auto-expandable, auto-collapsible paso doble that ran inside NBC News. We also had these more native, integrated loading screen presentations that were in a series of different apps. And then lastly, we had wide reach banners that were available everywhere else, as well as iAd. This campaign ran on iAd as well. Once the user actuated on any one of these units, this took them into a personalized social media experience where it was all about them. So American Express wanted to ask the user if they wanted to save on some of their favorite things. How did they use their American Express card? They wanted to save on these things using social: Facebook, Foursquare, and Twitter. So we collected their first name. You know, they could type in their first name using the native control, type in their hometown. And then we asked them, how do you use your American Express card? Shopping for clothes, shopping for gadgets, travel, or dining. Try a new bistro. I'll choose that one. And then check this out. This actually allowed the user to then hook into the photo roll on their phone and actually select a photo from a cool bistro they went to recently. And they could use all the native controls, pinch and zoom. This is actually playing inside the ZBI native player. So it's half HTML5, half kind of native technology, but it did not require an app update in order to go live. So it's this perfect midpoint between an app and a media campaign. Then, once that's all done, we composited that into a personalized panorama that was all about the user. So here you see, welcome in John, that's my name. Entering Longwood, that's my hometown. Twitter interop was actually tied into the system or the app level. So all they had to do was tap the Twitter bird in the ad, and the text in the button would change from follow to following, and they were following that brand, so it got great Twitter engagement. And then this is, of course, the photo from the photo reel. This is a photo based on their interest that they chose earlier. We had a long-form brand video, and then they could actually sign up to save in Foursquare, Facebook, or Twitter. So a very cool and comprehensive native advertising experience. We think this is actually the most ambitious mobile ad campaign that has ever run. It ran deep, and it ran at breadth on rich media, iPhone, and Android. So that was a really, really, really cool case study, and Again, we really celebrate this rise in native mobile advertising. If you're interested in learning more, we welcome you to fly by zoomobi.com/adlab, which is going to have a bunch of examples and good ideas for you for your creative ideation on your next mobile campaign. Thanks.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Great stuff. Next up, we have Jonathan Carroll. Take it away.
First off, thanks for being here with us today on the panel. You know, it's a beautiful day outside, and you could have done anything while your boss thought you were here. Unfortunately, you all made a wrong decision and came to the panel, so you'll recognize that later, I guess, but we appreciate you being here, even though you're not outside enjoying a beautiful day. So I work for a company called Chaotic Moon Studios, and we make not websites. We don't make websites that we farm out to somebody. We make applications for mobile devices, right? And we all do all sorts of interactions for companies like Disney and Marvel and Whole Foods and Starbucks. But before that, I was at a company that was a small startup called Alamo Fire, and we did a lot of development with just actually web-based stuff and with Facebook. And then we came up with a product called Gowalla. And it was a location-based social sharing service, which we wound up selling to Facebook about 1.5 years ago. So where I'm coming from is not actually me being Don Draper, because I'm pretty sure we all know that's not the case. I don't have on a suit. I've got on the cardigan and the scraggly-looking beard, so no confusion there. I try to keep things simple. But what we're going to do is go over his 10 rules for building apps that don't suck. Pretty sure he would agree with most of these if he were at our agency. So the first one is, don't play games. So if you were to come to Chaotic Moon or any agency that would make you a mobile app that's worth its salt, they would tell you to avoid everything you ever heard about gamification, because basically what it's going to do is it's going to dilute your campaign. It's going to dilute the actual rich content that your brand has. It's going to probably dilute the engagement that the brand wants to have with the ultimate user, which is their consumer. It's not always the case, but in a lot of the things that we wind up doing with our partners, it is something that we tend to avoid. So one of the case study that I have for this particular one, and also one thing you shouldn't play games with, is your PowerPoint, because as you can see, when I made this PowerPoint and sent it from my MacBook Air to the Windows server that received it, it decided to put it in different fonts than what I sent. So don't play games with PowerPoints either. So we had the opportunity to take over, a few years ago, take over the mobile apps for Pizza Hut. And one of the things that they had at the time was this gamification in ordering. And what it looked like is you get your phone out and you were in the ordering process and you're like, yeah, I want chicken wings. That's the best, chicken wings. And so you'd be like, I want teriyaki sauce. And what they made you do was play a little game. Before you could order your chicken wings, you had to pull it out and go shake, 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 shake teriyaki sauce. Like you were shaking the sauce all over your wings. Well, that's actually kind of fun, right? I just enjoyed doing it just then. But the problem with that was it was creating this threshold. You couldn't skip it. You had to do it every single time. And it was creating this threshold between Pizza Hut and somebody that wanted to give Pizza Hut their money to buy something that Pizza Hut had that they wanted. Well, we know every time you have to step through a threshold, anytime you have to click the next button, right, instead of the done button, you're going to lose double digits of users every time. Whether that's that they want to buy pizza or they want to sign up for Gowalla. You are going to lose double digits of users or of customers, of people that want to engage with you every time you put a threshold there. So Pizza Hut is awesome, and they are a great client. We love being with them. And they said, we'll let you take that away. So we did, and within a few months of the app update going out, not only had chicken wing sales gone up in app, they had actually eclipsed people buying the chicken wings on the online ordering service. And we were a little happy about that one. So we decided that was now an official rule, don't play games. Except that one of the other rules is do play games. So the problem with gamification is just deciding that you're going to do it everywhere, right? But there are places you need to do it. Don't do it if you're trying to get somebody to give you money and you're in a retail situation. Don't mess with that. You know, there's a relationship there. It's called you getting money and them getting something they want. But if it's an entertainment situation, then that's a great time to introduce some gamification. So last year, BET came to us and they said, hey, we want some help making a brand new app for the BET Music Awards in June. And we were like, great, that sounds awesome, thanks. And they said, we want to change the voting mechanism, because it used to be just we'd hold up the phone, we'd go click, 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 I want Rihanna to win, and I don't want Chris Brown to win. No, anything there. So I want all these artists, I'm just going to touch the tabs. You know, this is way easier than voting in Florida. But we want it to be more fun than that. So we want it to be gamified. And our initial reaction, I'll put the finger on me. My initial reaction was like, hey, are you sure about that? And they're like, yeah, let's try it. We trust you guys, do something fun. So we sat around the product team and we came up with this game. It was very much like playing Pong. And you just sit there with your phone and you like shoot things up at targets and break bricks and junk like that. And every time you did that, as your score increased, so did your votes for Rihanna to win the User Choice Award. And even when we were sitting around the office, I was like, man, this seems really weird. Like, this does not seem like the way to vote, you know. I know what I'm talking about. This is kid music, and I'm 34 years old. Damn it, this is not the way to vote for your favorite artist. But guess who was wrong? It was me. Because that went live, and it went live to the point that kids were voting for their favorite artists multiple hours a day. It probably wasn't because the game was the coolest thing they'd ever seen. It was a little on the cheesy side. But it's because it was a way for them to interact in an addictive way to keep propping up something they wanted to do for their favorite artist to win. It eclipsed by, I think it more than tripled the amount of time that users spent voting for their favorite artists in the app over the previous year. And we even anecdotally had BED tell us that people were calling their offices directly saying, what's going on? My kid's phone got hacked. And they were like, well, what are you talking about? And they said, well, it shows that they were on your app 6 hours a day. Up until the BET Awards, and so we had people angry about cell phone bills that weren't on unlimited plans, and secretly we were like, yes! So don't play games. Do play games, but also don't play games, and that led to rule number 3, and that was, you are not always right. Like, that's a huge deal, right? You are not always right. When you're building a strategy, when you're building a mobile app, you need to remember that. Like, you may have this picture in your mind of what awesomeness looks like, and you are not always right. So one thing I did actually, because I know I'm so full of just caca up here sometimes, is I asked some people that really know what they're talking about to give me some advice to put in these case studies. So the first one is from my friend Ajay Wagre over at HomeAway. He's a mobile product manager, and he had this to say: if you listen properly to your users, you will probably find that you're not as right as you thought you were. Using their feedback as an integral part of your compass for your product, it makes it hard to go wrong. You've got to listen to that. What is the user telling you? What's the user data that you have? Not just what you have in your mind as a developer, as a brand, but what do you know about your demographic? My friend Tim Van Dam, who goes by the handle Max Voltar, he's a product designer at Instagram. And Tim has this to say: never let your ego get in the way of building a great product. Be open to the feedback and learn from it. You know, maybe you don't have feedback when you do a whole version rollout, right, if it's the very first time. But immediately, as Martin was saying, like, be willing to accept that feedback and do something with it. So don't play games. Do play games. You're not always right, but the good news is the client is not always right either. And you may have the client, you may be the client. I don't really care. The client is not always right. So what that means in my mind is sometimes somebody's going to come to you and they're going to have this big thing in their head that they want to do. And you're going to come back to them with data or with another idea that you know anecdotally or statistically or just through your own experience. This is the better way to solve for this problem. And maybe the idea is the problem's already been solved. You're making a new wheel that doesn't need to be made. So our CEO has a saying that he tells people before they give us money. And the saying is, we are happy to fire you at any time. And people always like shake their head like, well, you sound like a jackass. And he's like, no, really. Like, at some point, you've got to remember, if you're hiring a professional, like any of these guys up here, to build an app for you, to help you with marketing or anything like that, or if your brands if you represent brands, they're paying these guys money for their expertise and for the things that they know how to do, that they're awesome at, and that they have years of experience doing. And so we found, this is kind of a case study across the board, that our best clients are clients that are willing to let us change their minds, to let us have a dialogue with them. And that leads to the next one. The client is sometimes not always right, just like we're not always right. And so what is the medium point on that? It is data. Data is your friend. And the main data I'm talking about here is not necessarily iOS versus Android or which handset is going to be the hot one. It is user data. And I hate even saying the word user. I heard somebody tell me one time, and they thought this is a massive breakthrough, we don't call them customers anymore, we call them users. And I was like, that's awesome, we call them people. And so that's the thing you want, right? You want to think about who are the people using this app. The mom that's going to use the shopping list that we make for Whole Food, or the student that's going to use that other app these guys made to find the books that he needs for school. Who is that person? Find out as much data as you can about that person, and then make the experience awesome for them. Not the way you think it's awesome, that's focused on me and on my product and on my content. Think about that, but also give as much time in your head to your user. Jeff Brown is the product designer over at Twitter, and Jeff said, building an app that doesn't suck requires a lot of things, But the one main thing is empathy. Without knowing who you are building and designing for, you are building an app that is destined to fail. And Jeff knows a lot about that. He's been at Twitter for a long time. He was at IDEO before that, and it's a huge thing. But we try it at Chaotic Moon too. Any mobile developer or company that you see doing something awesome, I guarantee you they are putting people, not user data, as far along in their product and design process as possible. So data is your friend, but Don Draper is swirling in the cloud of doubt here. Never happens with Don. The web is not your friend. Now, the web is your friend. My favorite thing about the internet is all the stuff you can learn, right? But if you are building a campaign, if you're doing something for your brand and you're like, you know what I'm going to do today? Instead of spending time about my user, I'm going to go to Mashable and see what's happening on Mashable. And you go see what the competition's doing, or what the press is saying about you, or the competition. Or you go to TechCrunch, or Business Insider, or Gawker, or God knows what.com. I don't think that's a real website. But if you go there, instead of looking at that data that you need to have, you're probably going to get sucked into this warp of, well, maybe we should do that feature instead. I mean, that wasn't even our product plan, but those guys at Mashable say it's hot. We need that. And you totally don't need that. You need to stick to that data and that product plan you had earlier. When I was at Gowalla, our founder was Josh Williams. He was our designer founder. He's a product manager at Facebook now. And he had this to say recently: play by your own rules. Listen to your users more than the press. Do not get sucked in the gravity hole between you and your competition either. Ruthlessly run your own path and not someone else's. And so that's why I say the web is not your friend. It is. Enjoy. There's so many good things there. But do not get sucked in that gravity hole of finding out what's the latest thing in tech, what's the latest thing in advertising. Find your course, listen to your users, and stick to it. Next rule from Don is have a drink. I think you all know that one already. But one of the things that goes with having a drink, while you're having that drink, think about this quote from my friend Andy Elwood, who runs business development at Waze. He tells us at all the talks he gives, and he's like, don't mess this thing up, man. There's timing to it. So I was like, okay, I'll pretend to be you. If you make a decision that's good for the brand and not good for the user, and he said make sure there's a long pause there, so it's not good for the brand either. So think about that the next time you're having a Don Draper drink and Peggy is looking over the deal to be like, what's he doing in there? Speaking of Don Draper, one thing I think he says a lot is make it simple. And that's a big thing that we learned, maybe the hard way at Gowalla, is we had all these great ideas for helping people share and connect and discover and all these things with their friends. And so we crammed it all in version 1. And then we got into a gravity hole, a gravity war ourselves with Foursquare. And then we got a few million users, and they got several million users, and the press was saying this thing and that thing and this thing and that thing. And both of us had to start cutting features because we realized, wow, one of the favorite features we had at Gowalla, 6% of our users use. And we were like, this is the best feature ever. And Foursquare was doing some of the same things, and meanwhile there was this company that you may have not heard of called Bourbon, and they entered the arms race of location as well, and they realized, wow, this is a massive time suck, all these stupid features that 6% of the users are using. So they tweaked a couple things so that all you could do was take a picture, which seems really lame. You could also say where you were. And so they changed their name from Bourbon to Instagram. And at this point, obviously, I mean, Gowalla was good. We sold to Facebook. I think Instagram recently sold to Facebook. So make it simple, but not too simple. It needs to have a purpose and a focus, right? Tim Van Dam, who is a product designer at Instagram, in fact, says have a long-term plan. Have a long-term plan. It can't just be willy-nilly we're changing things or just cutting it down to one feature. Change is good, but do it in bite-sized proportions, or bite-sized portions. It is respectful to your users, and it helps you make short-term decisions. So keep things simple, but not too simple. If you're sitting in a client meeting and somebody on your team says, wait, why wouldn't we just use Facebook to do that? That means it's too simple. Not that I've been in that meeting before. The final rule from Don Draper on don't build apps that suck, it's just don't build apps that suck. So there you go.
Thank you, Jonathan. I think I want a martini after that. So it looks like we have about 5 minutes left. I wanted to ask the panel a few questions, so we're going to try to respond quickly to that, and then we'll open it up to your questions, okay? Just one quick question. I think this is very important. We talk about the technology, which is obviously why we're here. You know, a lot of you guys are developers. Some are from brand, and some are from the agency side. But at the core of what we do is really about being creative, right? So how do you actually stay inspired, and how do you keep your teams inspired? Actually, a mic would help.
I can speak to that. We actually have a very rich design-centric culture. My background's in design user experience, and we always write the word design with an uppercase D. We have actually a meeting every Friday morning called uppercase D that is one of the meetings that we all look most forward to, and it always starts with a 20-minute creative inspiration delivered by one member of the design team on everything from architecture to gardening to video games. It's a really wide-ranging, and it's really good. I worked for Disney for years, and one of the things that was really interesting to me is, Disney would be in the crunch, shipping a, animated feature, and yet they would always take the time to stop, take a deep breath, and sketch the human form, or something to just sort of like go back to our creative roots. You can get so focused on a specific project or a specific campaign that sometimes you lose that. So we really make that be a weekly heartbeat and a cultural tenet at the company.
I think for us it's three things. It's listening to the customers and getting great ideas from what they would like to see. Second, it's looking at our own platform and just pushing the envelope on what that thing can do. And the third thing is listening to our team. We've got a very diverse team inside of Zite, great ideas. I think you put the three things together and you come up with amazing creative direction for the company.
We do some of the stuff that's very similar to what John said, very, very similar kind of creative sessions or whatnot. And we do another thing beyond, in addition to that, I guess, where we regularly kind of go over our own apps. And since we're very app-centric, and we'll pull out our laptops and our phones and be like, hey, these guys over here made this app, and like it's what I use now. It's my favorite to-do app, or it's the best calendaring thing ever, or I'm not on Spotify anymore. I'm using Moog or something like that. And we do that a lot, and just kind of self-critique and kind of add that to our creative flow of making sure that if it's an idea from somebody else that's awesome, then we need to give them credit and kind of be like, okay, they've set a new bar for us.
Excellent. So we've got about 3 minutes, so I really would like to hear from you guys. The mic is right here in the center. Don't be shy. Please come up. We have amazing brain trust here, so we'd love to answer any of your questions.